Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Quinney, and this is the Flames Faceoff, brought to you by the Hockey Writers. This is a weekly show where we bring together some of our best writers to discuss all things Flames. And to be sure you don't miss an episode of the show, you can like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just press that little red button on the right-hand lower corner of your screen. And be sure to follow us as well on Facebook and Twitter. And one thing you won't want to miss is some of the great hockey content that we have at thehockeywriters.com. So with that, let's get going. And I'd first like to introduce the panel. We have with us Mr. Colton Pankiw. Colton, how are things?
Hey, Paul. Good, thanks.
Great stuff. Love those buffalo horns behind you in the background. Very Calgarian of you. Yeah. And Greg Tysowski. Welcome, Greg.
Good to see you.
Great stuff. And last but not least, Mr. Brett Krauss with all those Flames sweaters in the background. Love to see that.
Oh, yeah. I got a whole variety.
Yeah. Great stuff, including Blasty. Well, let's start right away. The Flames have played 4 of their 5 Eastern road trips, and they've picked up a possible 5 of 8 points, won 2 of the 4 games, just to put themselves outside of a playoff spot. Almost caught Montreal yesterday. So if you're Flames management, how are you feeling after the week? What's going through your head? Greg, your thoughts on that?
Well, it kind of depended on the day of the week, because this one thing I can say about these Flames is they're not boring, and there's always lots to talk about. Because after Toronto, they were just, I think, under 2 minutes away from back-to-back shutouts against the best team in the North Division, and it was unfortunate how that game ended with the late goal and then the OT goal. But they were this close to like taking 2-2, and then what happened next was just unbelievable. Like I was watching my first Ottawa game, and I was just thinking, how does this happen? I know they had played like, I think, 5 of the last 7 nights, so maybe fatigue was a factor. But we talked about inconsistency last episode, and it has to be the headline again, because how do you go from almost taking back-to-back shutouts against the best team, one of the best teams in the league, mind you, to getting absolutely hammered by the worst team in the league. So it's I don't know what to think. I know they bounced back great with that following game, but to see them lose 6-1 to Ottawa was just another kind of gut punch. If you're a Flames fan, and if you're covering the Flames, you just shake your head and go, like, who is this team? So like at this point, I have no idea what management is thinking, but I'm open to suggestion as to what the Flames should do heading forward, because they have to stay consistent. But I'm open to all ideas and how they accomplish that.
Colton, what's your take if you're in the GM's office? How would you be feeling about this week?
Yeah, I'm sure Brad Treliving is kind of as confused as all of us. It's like Greg said, they come out, they had that really pretty good set against the Leafs both games, and then just get hammered by Ottawa. And if it's a team, it's kind of one thing if it's just one game, but it's been happening all year with the inconsistencies, and I don't know, it just really makes you scratch your head and wonder. Like Greg said, I really don't know the answers. I'm curious to see what Treliving's going to do, but I don't have any answers right now.
Brett, what do you think? Are you feeling any better? Do you think they've turned a corner here, like I read in some optimistic articles written about them?
Not so sure that they've turned a corner just yet, but I think the hand gets a little further away from the panic button after, getting back on track with yesterday's win. And like the guys said, they were 2 minutes, if not less, away from 2 wins against Toronto there. And that could have changed the whole week. A loss to Ottawa is never good, and they kind of looked lifeless that whole game. But I think you kind of got to hold off for right now and just kind of continue to assess and see where it goes from here.
Yeah. I mean, on that point, have they turned a corner? Yeah, I agree. A little too soon. A couple of things that I saw as red flags is, before that hammering, that shellacking they administered to Ottawa yesterday, they in their previous 5 games, over half the goals that they scored in their last 5 games was in that game against Ottawa, scoring 6 goals. So I don't know that says a lot about their firepower. A little disappointed with the way they lost that they had 3 minutes to go in Toronto, and they found a way to lose the game, although they did walk out with a point. So I think there's a fair amount to be concerned about there. Colton, what are your thoughts? With that in mind, that their scoring still seems to be a problem.
Yeah, it's frustrating because, like we had said last podcast, I think on paper it looks like a pretty good roster. I'm not sure if it's just in a bit of a funk right now, but I mean, really, it was all last season too. Like with Gaudreau and Monahan, lots of guys had down years. I don't know. At the start of the year, it was looking, especially like Gaudreau was in for a big bounce back, and that's kind of slowed down over the last bit. So you hope that it's just a bit of a cool stretch and they can heat up right away.
Yeah. Greg, any concerns there with?
Well, I have concerns with their scoring depth on this team because they Gaudreau's having a good season so far, but Monahan's been picking it up. But Milan Lucic has more goals than Monahan, which is crazy. And that's, no one would have ever expected that from the guy who scores 20 to 30 goals every season. So, and a bigger concern for me is just once you get past the first 2 lines into the third, and especially the fourth line, these guys can't score a goal. Like, they've used Levo, Nordstrom, Simone, Brett Ritchie, Glenn Godden, Buddy Robinson, Zach Ronaldo, all those guys combined have played 57 games and 0 goals from those guys. They had 1 goal from Byron Frazee, of all people, who's been in the roster for, I think, 6 games this year. And so I don't know. And I know that Derek Ryan's been hurt. He's the 4th line center, and he's been pretty consistently getting like 30 points a season for the Flames the last couple of years. So I think they need to try and shake things up on this bottom end of the roster. And I wrote last week about the Stockton Heat, and I'm going to write another story this week about who might be some of the candidates to come up. And I know that Emilio Pettersson has been, looking really good this year. Matthew Phillips, he's kind of another Andrew Mangiapane kind of guy. He's and Adam Ruzicka has 6 points to lead the Stockton Heat. So I don't see why they can't, with the Stockton Heat playing out of Calgary now, to really mix it up on this taxi squad and to get things different, get things shaked up in that bottom part of the lineup. Because at this point, with the 0 goals for 57 games from those 6 guys or 7 guys that I mentioned, what's the harm in like trying a couple of farm guys out there from Stockton, because they need something. Secondary scoring is getting to be a big problem for the Flames.
Yeah. No, I was looking at some of those stats to the bottom 6. I mean, Bennett has 4 goals in, I think, 21 games. He's a -8. Levo, just 2 goals in 17. He's a -4. Nordstrom, 0 goals in 20. He's a -5. Brett, what are your thoughts on the scoring situation with Calgary?
Yeah, I think those bottom 2 lines, they've kind of been, I mean, the 4th line for sure has just been a ghost all season. I think I was just reading the other day that Josh Levo is kind of suffering from bad puck luck. He's one of the highest forwards in the league with below expected goals. So he's due for one soon. A guy like Nordstrom, he doesn't move the needle much for me. It seems he's kind of just become a full-time penalty killer, and that's about it. And yeah, like Greg said, maybe here in a couple weeks, if they can't get something going, maybe they do call up a Matthew Phillips or a Adam Ruzicka, because I actually watched those couple of those Heat games, and Matthew Phillips, small but skilled, and Ruzicka is a big man he's got hands. So, it might be worth a shot if Stockton's rolling it, over the next month or so, and just to shake things up a bit if they can't because they need secondary scoring. I kind of thought when Johnny got off to his hot streak there, it was going to come to an end at some point, and they needed other guys to step up. And I think that's what we saw as Gaudreau kind of cooled off a little bit. And yesterday in the broadcast, they said they had 8 goals in their previous 19 periods before that game yesterday. So yeah, they need it bad to get it going.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you guys though, on this point about these lines, is that they did have an explosion of offense in this last game, and you may have noticed that the old is back together. Like they put Johnny and Monty with Lindholm on the first line, and they had the 3M reincarnated with Mangiapane and Tkachuk and Backlund, and even the third line was one of the most successful lines for the playoff, where you had Bennett, Lucic, and Dubé. And you can't really argue with the results. They had 6 goals. So I was kind of wondering what you guys thought of the coaching staff deciding, maybe we should go back to what was working so well a couple of seasons ago. Like was it inevitable that they were going to switch these lines back and move Lindholm off the center?
I'm not so sure if it was like inevitable, but because I think they kind of thought they had the depth to sort of differentiate the roster. But I think it was a good idea to go back to those 3 lines, because there's that consistency problem we were talking about last week. The Monahan line, they've played together for better part of 3 seasons. There's that chemistry. Tkachuk and Backlund have played together since Tkachuk's rookie season, and now you just put Mangiapane on there. And the Bennett line, I mean, they worked well last in the playoffs. So I mean, why not go back to that if they do well out there? Like I've noticed that line, once they can get the puck in deep, like they can really play with it down low, and they can really hem teams in. So there's something there for sure.
I guess that depends on whether Ward is actually going to, you talk consistency. Is he going to be consistent in this, or are we going to see more changes? I don't know. What do you think, Colton? You're nodding your head.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of fans are saying about time. I think lots of times coaches in the NHL or in any level can kind of overthink things a bit too much. And I think we've seen with these lines in the past that they do work. And obviously, if they're working, I think just keep it as is and ride it out, and hopefully it just continues to work for the stretch of the season.
Yeah. Any thoughts on I guess the way the Flames lose? So far this year they've had blowout losses against the Jets. That was February 4th. They lost 4-1. Don't know if that's a blowout, but it's more than, it's 3 goals or more. February 17th, they lost 5-1 to the Oilers. February 20th, 7-1 to the Canucks. And then 6-1 against the Senators earlier this week. Any thoughts on what that says about them with the blowouts? I mean, the excuse was against Ottawa. Oh, well, they were tired, jet lag. They had a number of excuses. Greg, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think we had talked about this last week as well about, maybe they're not playing for each other. Maybe there's problems in that room. When we see these real big letdown games, I know that other teams have them, but it seems the Flames have more of them this season than other guys. Like they've just been, I don't know. It's hard to explain how they can go, so hot and so cold, and from showing some good energy to just getting the doors blown off them. And you could just tell on that 6-1 game against Ottawa, like as the game dragged on, their energy level, the compete level, it was just falling off. And I know it's hard to get yourself up once you're down by like 4 or 5 goals, but
yeah, I think they gave up after the second goal.
They did. Yeah. And it's kind of hard to wrap your head around that. If this is a team that is striving for a playoff spot. Like every game counts so much, and they're all in division games. Like every game's like the proverbial 4-pointer. So like what do these guys need to do to get motivated? And I don't really know what the answer is. People have been talking about coaching changes. It's not likely, and the roster moves are tough in this COVID times with quarantines and stuff. So it's like, I think the solution has to be in that room. It has to be with this group of people. We've talked about maybe getting some of these young guys from Stockton in for the fourth line, but that's kind of a minor fix when you have a core like this who's had some success. So what do these guys have to do to really play for each other and to get motivated, show up for some of these letdown games? I don't really know how they do it. Like they have to find a way, because it's we're a third of the way into the season now, so they need to really get serious here.
Hey Brett, what are you thinking? Are we reading too much into the way the Flames lose? I mean, when they lose spectacularly.
I think I'm a little bit more on the optimistic side. I would probably omit those games, like the game against the Oilers and the Canucks, because for me, watching those games, that one against the Canucks, they had about a 3-minute breakdown, which cost them the game. But they relatively played well throughout that game. They went down 2-0, didn't start well, but they were starting to, make a comeback. And Mangiapane, I believe, scored to make it 2-1. And it looked like they were going to make a game out of it. And then it was just a quick 2-minute or less kind of breakdown there. And that ended up, they came out flat in the third because they were down 4-1. Yeah. And the same with the Edmonton game. They outshot them by nearly double. They outchanced them, more high danger area shots, and they just didn't get the goaltending. I think I mentioned it in my last article. I had said it was eerily similar to their final blow to the Dallas Stars back in August, where the team finally played well and then they couldn't get a save from their goalies. So I think that all four were kind of, Ottawa and Winnipeg, I would say, were kind of, they just never showed up. And but yeah, I think it's hard to read because sometimes, they show up and they play a game and they walk away with no points, and other nights, like they show up and don't play that great, but their goaltending gives them a win. So it's hard to gauge because even the way they win and lose isn't very consistent.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I want to switch gears a little bit, and I want to check in with our resident goaltending expertise, Colton Pankiw. What's your take on the goaltending? Riddick looked pretty good in Toronto, and then he really fell back to earth in Ottawa and stayed there, in my opinion, in yesterday's game. Lots of rebounds, times when he wasn't setting up correctly. What's your take on the goaltending situation? Do we need Markstrom back in the worst way?
Yeah, I mean, I think when they brought in Markstrom, you're bringing in a top 10, arguably top 5, I'd say, goalie in the league. With Riddick, I think it's just kind of what Riddick is. When he's on his game, like the 2 Toronto games, he looks like one of the best goalies in the league. And then that one Ottawa game in particular, it's just like the inconsistencies, I think, of why he hasn't really been able to become Calgary's number 1 guy over the years. It's just these inconsistencies always seem to plague him. And even yesterday, like, he was fine, but like you said, he just didn't instill much confidence. It was shaky goaltending the entire game. So yeah, I think the sooner they can get Markstrom back, the better off they are. Obviously, I seen today he was skating, so hopefully that's a sign in the right direction. They can get him back soon. But yeah, with Riddick for the time being, you really don't know what you're going to get. It's so inconsistent game to game, it seems often.
Yeah. Greg, any thoughts on that one?
Well, I also was kind of concerned about the backup to Riddick, because they had Zagadulin, which I was kind of confused about why he was in there and not Louis Domingue. But then I guess I had read that Louis Domingue had gone to a funeral in Quebec and needed to, enter quarantine. So, and I don't know if he's done his quarantine, because Domingue is an NHL veteran who of 139 games, he's played for 4 NHL teams. Like he's the kind of third string guy that you sign for a reason, because he has, and Zagadulin had zero NHL experience. When he was thrust into that game, he actually played okay, I thought. But so if Markstrom is gone, for longer than we think, like maybe a few more weeks or, maybe a week, who knows how long he'll be gone for. Maybe it could be days. We actually don't know. But I think Domingue is a much better prospect in net than Zagadulin. And if there's problems with Markstrom, even long term, because he had a bit of a history of being injured in Vancouver these last few seasons. I was kind of wondering about who would be best to back up Rittich. And of course, Domingue comes to mind. And if you're talking about the AHL Stockton Heat, Dustin Wolf made his debut against the Toronto Marlies last week, and it was disastrous. He had 5 goals on 11 shots. And it was like, maybe it's not the best idea to put this WHL kid in there. But since then, he's had 2 starts and he's led in 3 goals in 2 games, and he's led the Stockton Heat to 2 pretty good victories against the Marlies. So it's like, I'm not saying you have an 18-year-old to back up Rittich, but if the season goes along and there are more kind of goaltending problems with Markstrom not being healthy, I think you have to look at who's the backup for Rittich, because I think they were kind of hesitant to play anyone else other than Rittich on that back-to-back. Even though Rittich had played a lot of hockey and faced a lot of shots in Toronto, and they really, I think if Domingue was on the roster, he would have probably started that first game against Ottawa, because Rittich came out so flat, and he let in that 50-footer, and I think it's important to have depth in goal as the season progresses, and we'll see. If Markstrom's health is an issue, we may see multiple guys backing up Rittich this year. So,
yeah. Just switching gears, I wanted to touch on some of the articles that you guys had written this week. And Colton, you wrote one you waded into the coaching controversy in Calgary, and your big bold prediction was that there's going to be no change in bench bosses this year in Calgary. Did this week do anything to calm the controversy down, maybe secure Ward's job? What are your thoughts?
I mean, after the Toronto games, maybe yes, but like we've said, that Ottawa game again kind of makes you question things. But it was kind of just picking up where we were talking about last podcast with the coaching carousel that's going on in Calgary, and just it seems to be the same kind of thing with this group year after year, regardless of the coach. That factored in with obviously COVID too, makes it tough to bring in a coach at this time, just with the quarantine protocols and everything. So for that reason alone, I don't see a coaching change happen this year unless things go really, really bad, which let's hope they don't. I don't see that happening. But yeah, I think they'll stay with Ward for the rest of the season.
Well, there's a couple of coaches out there. Claude Julien, I guess Rod Brindamore. He's in discussions. Brett, what are your thoughts? Do you agree with Colton? No changes this year?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's too many hurdles. I don't know what the coaching interview process is like, but I'm sure it's a lot more difficult during COVID times here. And this is how many coaches for Brad Treliving now? So you kind of just sit there and think, how many guys can he hire and then fire when things don't work out before somebody above him starts looking at his job and whether he should be in that position. So I think Colton's right. I think we'll see Jeff Ward for the rest of this season unless it goes, real bad.
Sideways. Yeah. Well, and as Colton pointed out, it's up to the players. They've got to play. And I think even Lucic said the same thing. I forget what interview it was, one of the post-game interviews. Greg, are you a contrarian at all here, or are you sticking with Ward too?
Yeah, I think so, because and the Flames also don't have a big history of going out and hiring these big name coaches. The past several years, they've kind of I don't know if ownership wants to save money on coaches, but when's the last time they kind of went out and made a splash and hired one of these big name coaches like Alain Vigneault, I'm sure his salary would be probably quadruple what they're paying, their current coaching. And even before Ward, they had Glenn Gulletson, who's also like a kind of a first-time coach, or he had coached in Dallas, head coach, but they don't get out these big names. And I don't know really why they don't. And so because of their history of not going out and making a big splash, with these coaches that are available, then I don't really expect them to do it, especially this year with the way things are, with COVID and other quarantine measures. So because these guys might be, some of the big name coaches are out of the country. If they're based in the United States, you hire somebody and you have to wait a full 2 weeks before they can even take the reins of your team. So I don't know, even if this was a non-COVID year, the fact that the Flames seem to rarely, hire these big coaches that are out there, I would think that Ward's the guy for the rest of this year. And, they could still, turn this around. Montreal is kind of in a bit of a free fall right now. So I can see the Flames passing Montreal, even by just playing, pretty consistent, hockey over the next couple of weeks. They could be firmly in a playoff spot, in a couple of weeks from now. And Ward's job could be, more than safe, and people will stop all the whispers about coaching changes. So,
yeah. Hey, Brett, before I forget, I wanted to touch on your article this week. You wrote a nice piece on the Flames having to string together some wins to rebuild their confidence and shore up their playoff prospects. And you went out there on a limb saying they needed to win 4 of their 5 games with the lowly Ottawa Senators. Let's see. What's your bookie saying? How much money have you put down on them winning those 4 or 5?
Well, the odds might be a little higher after that 6-1 loss to Ottawa. But yeah, I still think they got to win these next 3, and then I think they play the Oilers and then the Senators again. And I think you gotta win those ones against the Senators. That's your chance to take points and move up in the standings. You see teams, I guess Toronto's lost twice to Ottawa, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's your point to try and make up ground. And even that game against Edmonton, that's going to be a big one too, to make up ground. Because I think if they can win their next one, they're only 4 points back. So yeah, they got to string together some wins still. And I don't know if they're going to do it, because I didn't have much confidence after the Toronto series, but a little bit more, and then it was all completely gone after that game against Ottawa. So good start yesterday morning / afternoon, but they got to keep it rolling now.
Colton, what are you saying, man? Or are they going to knock the Sens off in their next 3 games?
I hope so. I really was thinking they kind of needed to win all those games against the Sens. Just, not no knock on the Sens, but that's kind of the team that everyone in the division seems to be beating up on for points this year. So yeah, I mean, if they get those next 3, that puts them right back in the thick of things. Like Greg had said, Montreal's really sliding down the standings right now, so that 4th spot is pretty much wide open for the taking.
All right, Greg, I haven't heard anything from Colton or Brett on how much money they're actually going to put down on that. So
Yeah.
It's all up to you, man. How much money are you putting down?
I was looking at the Senators before this kind of set started, and they had won 3 of 5 heading into the set against Calgary. And after trouncing them 6-1, they had won, 4 of 6 all of a sudden. And they were looking not like the doormats that everyone else seemed to face. And I thought that was a little bit unfair for the Flames.
Harsh word.
Because
yeah.
Everybody else was just walking over these guys, and it was like almost guaranteed points. And as soon as it's Calgary's turn, then all of a sudden they're playing decent and they're actually, winning some games. And after the 6-1 game, I was like, oh my God. But then yesterday's game, the Sens looked like the Sens. Like they looked like the team that others have been just walking over. So I'm thinking now that the Flames, have had a few games of non-game days, that they were playing a lot of hockey. And I think maybe they were a bit drained when they got trounced like that. But I think now, I think they're going to run the table on the Sens now. I think the lines are looking good. I think the confidence is back, and I think the Flames. I'm gonna go on a limb and say they're gonna take the rest of these Sens games, and they'll be in fourth place, maybe even third place by the time we're talking next week.
All right, none of you guys are going to be allowed into Ottawa. I guess that's you've sealed your fate. Just on closing, I wanted to touch on Greg's article. It was a good article you wrote about the Stockton Heat being in Calgary, and that'll give them more flexibility in terms of who they bring up. Give me 2-3 guys that you'd bring up immediately that we haven't seen.
Well, I've been watching. I've been following the Heat this past week in this 4-game set to open their season against the Marlies. And after a terrible first game, they looked pretty good. And Matthew Phillips is playing with Adam Ruzicka right now, and they're really playing well together. And there was an interesting article in the Athletic talking about Matthew Phillips is pretty much a prototype of Andrew Mangiapane. They're the same height. They're actually born almost on the same day, and they kind of have a similar skill set. And I know the Flames already have a few smaller guys, but I think skill is never a bad thing. And so Matthew Phillips, little guy, but he's looking great. Ruzicka has impressed me a lot too. And there's Emilio Pettersson, who is playing his first few games for the Heat this year. He was playing at the University of Denver the past couple of years, and he has this Norwegian kid has been looking pretty sharp as well. So those are my big three, like Ruzicka, Phillips, or Pettersson. But I think Phillips is probably the most NHL ready, and he had a great season last year before a knee injury kind of derailed it. But so I'm hoping these guys will get a look at some point over the next couple of months, because like I said before, we were talking about that fourth line. Nothing's been happening anyway. So what's the harm in getting a look at these guys and see if they can spark some secondary scoring?
So Brett, what are your thoughts? Anybody you'd like to see up on the taxi squad from Stockton?
I think for me, it would probably be Matthew Phillips. They're kind of probably in a tier by himself. I actually wrote an article about one of my first few at the Hockey Writers, that Godden, Connor Mackey, and Matthew Phillips are probably all due for a cup of coffee in the NHL. And so far I'm 2 for 3 on that one. So just watching those 2 Stockton wins, I think he looks good in the AHL, and I think he looks ready for the NHL. Now he is quite small, so I'm not sure how that'll translate, but I think, he's been doing it his whole life, so I think he's used to it. The guys are just going to be a little bit faster, but probably the same size as guys he's seen in the American Hockey League. So I'd say, right away, Matthew Phillips. Adam Ruzicka, I don't know if I'd bring him up right away because he's only played the one season, but he's looked really good to start. And I know he was part of their return to play group there back in the summer. So they see something in him, I think, Flames management, that is. So, I think probably those 2 guys, if you're really looking to shake it up, maybe you get those 2 on a line with Glenn Godden on the fourth line and see what they can do.
Colton, anybody we've missed from Stockton that should get a cup of coffee, as Brett puts it?
I mean, not the coffee, these guys. Matthew Phillips has been the guy I've kind of been pushing for since the beginning of the season. One name that could maybe not as offensive as the other guys, but has some toughness and looks like he's a pretty good prospect is Martin Pospisil. He'd be a guy, again, like since they're in Calgary, these guys could get filtered in and out of the lineup a lot easier. The only thing is you were mentioning the taxi squad, and I think if they are going to get called up, it's important that they're actually playing, not just there for the ride. With how young they are, it's important that they keep getting games in. So if the plan is to play them, I'd like to see Matthew Phillips up too.
Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. We've run out of time, and as always, that was a great discussion. And thank you, everybody. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Flames Faceoff. But in the meantime, be sure to check out the hockeywriters.com where you'll find our weekly column, the Flames Weekly, which will bring you up to date on all the Flames actions in the previous week. And do check out the great hockey content that we have at thehockeywriters.com. See you next week.